Howdy y'all, I'm Matt and I'm learning Hindi. Welcome to our channel, Matt Learns Hindi. Why should we learn the Hindi script? Most Hindi courses start by trying to teach you phrases like, how are you? And that's great if all you want to do is learn some travel phrases. But I found for me personally, it's hard to really learn the language on a fundamental level without learning the rules. Part of the reason to learn the script, and it's called the Devanagari, technically just the Hindi script, it's used in a lot of languages. There's a lot of utility to it. If you can master the script, then that opens doors to learning other Indian languages as well. So another reason to learn the script, it makes it easier to grasp the sort of subtle differences in pronunciations between different words. There are some sounds in Hindi that really don't exist in English in a meaningful manner. Like it's the difference between ka and ka and ga and ga. So the untrained ear, those would sound almost exactly the same, right? But when you see them written out, you can really grasp how they're actually supposed to be pronounced. So it's really helpful that way to, have an idea what the words are. It also lets you, really picture the words as well, which is really helpful for someone that learns like me. Let's talk about how the script works. So technically, it's not an alphabet per se. The technical term for it is syllabary. The difference between syllabary and an alphabet is a little bit subtle, but basically what it means is what you see is what you get. They're not letters per se, they're sounds. So when you sound out the letters, the characters, I should say, in a Hindi word, you know exactly how it should be pronounced with relatively few exceptions. If you think about English, there's lots and lots of exceptions, right? There's lots of ambiguity to how words can be pronounced unless you really, know all the words, right? It's less intimidating than you would think from that regard because again, what you see is really what you get. I'd heard in languages like Mandarin, there's thousands of characters to learn, right? I was like, how am I ever going to learn the characters in Hindi? Well, as it turns out, there's less than 50 characters to learn. That's not that much more than English. So it's less intimidating than you think. Another point is that I found that adding mnemonics for the different characters really helps you to sort of embed, what the different characters are. I know right now they look like hieroglyphs, but as you study them, it starts to become clearer, really aids in knowing how to pronounce the word. So we'll start with a few consonant sounds. Hindi, like English, has vowels and consonants. Vowel sounds go between consonant sounds, or groups of consonant sounds, as we'll learn a little bit later. So one thing to note is that when you see a consonant, usually it's followed by a vowel, indicating what sound you pronounce after it. If there's not a vowel, though, you just pronounce it with the sound by default. So when you see characters, that's kind of the difference between a character and a letter. I'll show you an example to really illustrate this. So the first one I'm learning is ka, is the K sound like strike. This one, how I remember it is, you'll notice it looks a little bit like a teapot. Like I'm a little teapot, short and stout. Here's my handle, here's my spout. So teapot, kettle, ka. The next one is na. This is kind of the in sound, like nugget. This one, I feel like looks like the faucet when you're turning on the water, right? So I think about it as being like a nozzle. Nozzle, no. The next one, and this is where it starts to get a little bit tricky because the next few look a little bit similar, but I'll walk through how I've been learning them. So the first one is pa, the P sound, like paper. This one is kind of easy because it looks just like a P, but backwards. So backwards P, pa. The next one is ma. So when you see this for the first time, you'll feel like it looks a lot like the pa character, but I'll show you how I keep track of them. How I remember them though is I think about it being a little bit like the P character, but metal. Everything's rounded. You've got geometric line, right? Some people think of it as being like the moon as well. So you picture the square in the middle where you can kind of see the moon. I'm not planning to do a whole lot of writing in the Hindi script. My penmanship is poor enough in English. I don't like my chances in Hindi. In this case, this is one example where writing them out can really help you get a better sense of what the differences are rather than just looking at it. So I'm going to write out this one and you'll see how it differs from the pa character. So the pa character Howdy y'all,
is more
I'm Matt
rounded.
and
So
I'm learning Hindi. Welcome to our channel,
this-
Matt Learns Hindi. Pa, reverse P. In contrast, the M, you make sort of a loop when you start. So you go down, make a loop, ma. So pa, ma. See the difference? So pa and ma. So the next one also looks a little bit similar. It's ya. This is the Y sound, like young. So this one is a little bit similar, but it actually looks a little bit like a Y is how I remember it. Like if you were to write a Y like this, the difference is you're going to be yanking this first one. Yeah. So Y, yank, yeah. So pa, ma, yeah. The next one is a little bit easier because it's just so striking, and it's la. This one's got a heart right in the middle. So when I see this one, I think love, heart, love, la. Finally, we have va. So this one's special because it can be pronounced two ways. It can be pronounced va or wa. Typically, if it's at the start of the word, it's va, and if it's the middle or end, it's wa. But this can vary a little bit based on the word and based on the particular speaker as well. Sometimes people will say them just a little bit differently. This is actually true of Spanish as well. If you know Spanish, sometimes people say ve, sometimes they say we. So how I remember this one is, I think of it as looking like a veil. So if we write this one out, you make a circle, here's your person, and then you give them a veil. And you close it on top. So veil, va. So next we're going to talk about some of the vowels. Technically, we've already learned our first vowel. That's the sound. It looks a lot like a 3T, which is kind of how I picture it. A 3 beside a T. So the interesting thing, like we've said, is if you have the character by itself, you pronounce it that way by default. Pa, ma, ya. So that one's easy enough. So the rest of the vowels get slightly more complex because they have two forms. They have the dependent form and the independent. So if a vowel if it stands alone, typically at the start of the word, but not always, it has the independent form. So the independent form for the sound is that 3T. There's no dependent form because it's implied. However, the rest of the vowels will have a dependent form. And technically it's called the matra form, but I'll say dependent just to make it a little bit easier. The next character is this one looks similar, except for it's 3TT instead of just 3T. That's how I picture it. That's the independent form. The dependent form is just a line after a consonant. So if we go to our examples, we have pa here, but drawing a line after it makes it pa. Pa. This one, it becomes ma and la. So the next one is the E sound, the long E sound, like feed or greed. This one looks a little bit like a snake in the grass, right? And you see the snake kind of popping out. So I think, snake, like you're scared. Independent form is a little bit scary, but the dependent form is a lot more straightforward. So this one is similar to the sound, but you draw a little half loop connecting it with the previous consonant character. So in our examples, this is pa, but if this line connects to here, it becomes e. This next one is ma, but we'll connect it, become me. And finally, ya, ye. Now that we've learned some vowels and consonants, we can put it together and start to really sound out some words. Again, one of the cool things about the script is really what you see is what you get. So you know exactly how to pronounce things based on the characters in the particular word. So we'll start with this word. So it's a little bit intimidating the first time you see a Hindi word with a bunch of characters, right? But you just take a breath and try to sound out each one. You can usually get it. So really notice there's, again, a nozzle, na, and then a line, or another na, and finally, e. So, na, ni, nani. It means your maternal grandmother. So let's do another word that uses some more characters that we've learned. This one starts with the pa character, the e sound, another n, and then a. So, pina. It means to drink. Let's look at an example that uses the independent. This one, you notice it starts with 3T, a. We've got the pa sound, na, a. So, upna means ours. Now let's look at a couple examples of implicit a sound. This word, we have na, ma, and ka for namak, which means salt. Again, you'll notice that you don't see any vowels in this word, so it's just namak. Well, one other note too is that usually there's not an sound at the end of the word. So it's not namaka, it's just namak. Here's another example. We have ka, ma, and the heart, or la. So kamal, kamal. That means lotus. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the name Kamala, and it actually comes from this word. So one last thing to learn today is about the idea of conjunct consonant. So this is when you pronounce consonant sounds together without a vowel in between them. So sometimes, but not always, in Hindi, when you don't have the implicit sound, one way that the words are written to tell you that it's not there is by sort of modifying one or both of the letters. In this case, we'll look at the word kya. You'll notice I didn't pronounce it kaya, just kya. And the reason for this is if you look at the ka character in the start, remember it's got the teapot with the handle and spout, right? But it's got the spout cut off and it's sort of merged into the ya character. So that's how they indicate that it's a conjunct consonant. So not kaya, kya. And it means what? This is obviously a pretty important word, which we'll learn a little more about in later lessons. So that wraps it up for my first Hindi lesson. After this, I already feel less intimidated by the Hindi script, and I'm able to pronounce simple words that use the first few characters that we've learned. So I hope this was helpful for you too. That's all we have time for, but if y'all have any tips for learning Hindi or any favorite mnemonics for Hindi characters, please drop them in the comments below. If you want to follow along with my journey, please like and subscribe. Namaste.